Hello to all our Top FM viewers. Today we've got a special guest on our studio. He's Peter Zalmayev, who's a Ukrainian American political correspondent. And his mission, he hosts a weekly international program on Ukrainian TV, and he's also the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, New York, Kiev. He's embarked on a mission, many countries, for a message. Hello, Peter.
Pleasure to be here.
Welcome
to paradise, as they say.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Peter, can you please introduce yourself to our viewers first?
Peter Zalmayev, Ukrainian American political commentator, TV host. I've been dividing my time between Kiev and New York, but the last 3.5 years, precisely the years of war, I was based in Kiev. Well, up until last September, I was based in Kiev, broadcasting from the studio, oftentimes as drones and ballistic missiles were flying past our building, past the 26th floor of our high-rise. We can talk about the surrealism of living in Ukraine these days, but almost a year ago to this date, I decided to embark on a life-changing journey for me to countries that I had always dreamed of visiting, remote countries of South Pacific, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Australia, Fiji, and from there to fly to South Africa in last March and commence my slow trip from South Africa through 20 African countries by land, no hopscotching by plane, all the way to Nairobi, from where I flew to Seychelles, Madagascar, Mauritius, and I will be ending this current leg of the journey in Reunion Island. And the point is to talk about the war in Ukraine, to share my experience of living in Ukraine, the daily life of Ukrainians coping with a very, once again, surreal situation, a European country under full-scale attack, with ballistic missiles, with drones, etc. No place in Ukraine is off limits to Russian missiles, in effect turning the whole country into a war zone and into a front line. And also to share my view why I think this is a very consequential conflict whose import goes far beyond Ukraine's borders, and how it has affected African countries. And so it is not just a talking tour, but a listening tour. I also elicit opinions about this war, why people sympathize with this side or that side, how they have felt the effects of this war on their livelihoods. And therefore, I am able to report. I have a weekly TV show on Ukrainian television, so I make it a tradition to dedicate about 15 minutes of every hour-long program to the country I'm at, where I interview people from, regular like taxi drivers, people on the street who want to share their view, to foreign ministers. I've met with several foreign ministers on my trip, and so that's my mission.
So Peter, you've traveled over several countries, right? Now, and continents.
This is my 30th country on this trip.
And different continents. So far, how was the response?
The response has been tremendously more receptive, pardon my tautology, than I expected, even moving from the much friendlier terrain of New Zealand and Australia, which are open allies of Ukraine, to Africa, where I thought I would encounter much more resistance to this message, like South Africa, for example, which is a member of BRICS, a founding member of BRICS that brings together countries like India, China, and Russia, whose president is very friendly with Vladimir Putin, and yet I was welcomed with open arms. I was able to go on SABC's state TV channel. I was a guest of half a dozen of radio stations. I wrote a guest column for Daily Maverick, a major South African newspaper, etc. And other countries, pretty much everywhere I've been able to go on state TV to share my views, and also encountering regular people on the street, contrary to a lot of propaganda efforts by the Russian side, who's very actively involved in Africa. Russia has, let me remind you, out of 54 African countries, I think Russia has embassies in 49. Ukraine, maybe 17. So Ukraine is playing catch up when it comes to narratives. It's the forces and the resources are very unevenly matched, right? And so I'm kind of, I don't want to presume too much, but I try to fill that hole, right, in communications by traveling as essentially a self-appointed ambassador at large of Ukraine. One of our ambassadors in one of the African countries called me, Peter, you are our ambassador at large. And I wear that with pride.
So the conflict itself, it has caused a huge disruption in the world order. Yeah? And Ukraine is considered a big supplier of food also, because here in Mauritius also we were affected during the market, during the war, during the conflict, price-wise. So how do you when will it be over?
Well, that's a $1 million question, of course, and I hear in your question that I think the message is that folks are tired of this war, not just in Ukraine, of course, and by some indications, not just Russians. According to some polls, 70 Russians want this war to end. The question is on which conditions. That's a major sticking point. But a lot of people in Africa and remote, countries, other than feeling a sympathy for a country under siege, they have felt the effect of this war on themselves because, as you said, one of the biggest producers of grain and exporters of grain in the world, in very poor countries, including those that I've visited, like Lesotho, Mozambique, and Malawi, people living under $1 a day. That sort of fluctuation is not just a matter of inconvenience. It's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of children going for weeks without enough, nutrition. That affects their, futures, right? Their future successes in life. I mean, this has across the board effects. Rise in inflation worldwide because of the rise in fuel as well. So all of this, of course, have knock-on effects, and this has been a major inconvenience to so to speak, for everyone around the world. And when you ask when will this be over, of course, unfortunately, the two sides remain very far apart. Because if you take the position that Ukraine should just compromise and give Russia what it wants, a piece of land.
Even though that Ukraine has the back of European leaders, except with the new administration, United States with Trump on the other side. But Ukraine being in Europe, you've got the back of the leaders.
That's kind of that's open to discussion exactly how much back we have, right? I mean, because if you compare it to the sort of confidence that Vladimir Putin is feeling with his support on the part of China, especially coming out of that meeting where he was parading
in China,
around with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un.
Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un, who actually took, you would think it's just North Korea, the world's outcast. But that outcast actually had the guts and the desire to send Russia live soldiers up to 15,000, something our allies have never had the temerity to do, and they're still ruling out that option only until after there's a peace concluded and maybe some peacekeepers will be sent to Ukraine, which is also another thing why Vladimir Putin is counting on victory. He feels the West is decadent, the West is weak and wimpy, meaning it has lost all sense of confidence. And the West there's no such thing as the West. It's not a country. The West is fractious.
But do you think that
there are various contending politics and right-wing politicians come to power? He's got his allies in the West, Fico of Slovakia and Orban of Hungary, who are acting as outright allies of Putin, trying to essentially erode any pro-Ukrainian unity from within both NATO and the EU. So you look at it and you think, even though
NATO.
Yes, and
being
so
a peacekeeper.
Yes, so Putin feels like it's a mismatch because on the one hand he's got this tight fist over his country, he's got other authoritarian countries backing him, and on the other hand you have Ukraine, and like you said, and these really strange, uncertain times where we no longer know if America is our ally, if America is anymore the leader of a liberal democratic world. Donald Trump has made it clear he does not care about liberal democracy. Now with this political assassination that just happened, God only knows what that's going to lead to. No matter how you look at it, it's not going to be in Ukraine's interest. We're all intertwined, we're all interconnected. There may be calls for just curtailing all sorts of foreign aid, including any future weapons deliveries to Ukraine.
But now you're in Mauritius.
Yes.
Have you you're touring Mauritius, and did you speak to stakeholders out here, to other media and everything? Yeah.
Well, I visited the studio of NBC today, and so hopefully my interview will be aired later. And unfortunately, both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister are on a trip to India.
Yeah.
I hope to meet with the Foreign Minister, and I think I had a good chance, but it's just a matter of poor timing. I'm still hoping to meet some intellectual or maybe a former government official to interview for my program. But it's always a matter of timing, and so it doesn't always work out, even though I've been blessed to meet other government officials in other countries. Hopefully I still have time to do it here. We'll see.
So, Peter, before ending, to all our viewers of Top FM, you, Ukrainian American, what's your message?
Well, the message is, and that's partly also in answer to a potential question I get asked a lot: why did I choose to come to Madagascar, Mauritius?
Yeah.
Why did I choose to go to Madagascar? Why did I come to Seychelles Islands? I mean, to me, they're not just, I don't view them as resorts. I mean, I view them as independent states, and I've always been fascinated about smaller countries. As someone who was born in the Soviet Union, it was Soviet Ukraine before, sixth part of the landmass, the biggest country ever. So naturally, as a child of the Iron Curtain who couldn't travel outside that big country, I was fascinated by smaller states. So it's a realization of a lifetime dream as well. It's a combination of this personal yearning to visit these remote places, but also to my understanding that every vote counts at the United Nations. Mauritius, with its population of 1.2 million people, its vote is just as important at the level of the General Assembly of the United Nations, which votes to condemn these resolutions, to approve or disapprove or abstain from resolutions condemning the aggression, is worth just as much as India's 2 billion people. Think about it. This is we still have a United Nations. I'm not sure how much longer we'll have it, but this is the closest we have to a world government. And at that level, my encouragement, my appeal to these countries is: you are within your sovereign right, of course, to be friends and have economic relations with Russia or whoever. But at the level of the UN, vote your conscience, specifically in order to preserve the sanctity of the United Nations, its charter, and the sanctity of international law that guarantees every country sovereignty. If Ukraine falls in this war, that sets a precedent for smaller countries precisely like Mauritius, countries like Taiwan. China is watching this very closely and the outcome of this war. We're already seeing the effects of this. Venezuela, all the way in South America, is eyeing its neighbor Guyana. It wants a piece of Guyana because all of a sudden that's our territory. It just happens that to be the oil-rich part of Guyana. But I'm just showing you how the effects will have a domino effect. If Ukraine is allowed to fall, and that's precisely why Europe is now belatedly waking up to just that potential outcome. If Ukraine falls, Russia will be right up at Europe's doorstep, threatening directly European democracies. Already, as we speak, 2 days ago, Russia launched 20 drones to Poland. And that has not set off that collective security agreement, Chapter 5 of NATO. And that's precisely what Putin is doing. He's probing, and he's showing that all your charters, all your agreements and treaties are worth nothing. You are too chicken. You're too afraid of us. And this is very disturbing for me to watch. It's disturbing to anyone who is still a believer in democracy. Mauritius is a liberal democracy and number one democracy in Africa. I think this message should resonate with the people here.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Peter.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And I hope that your message does go through, especially at the eve, if I can say, of the next General Assembly of the United Nations in New York.